What's up, Kingdom of Rock? This is Matt Gibson, and I'm here with our awesome panel of guests, guest and co-host. We've got Michael Melenda, as usual, in San Francisco. How's it going, Mike?
Good. Everything's awesome.
And today we have a special guest, Maor Appelbaum. He is a mastering engineer in Los Angeles, California, and we're going to be talking to him today about mastering, the music industry, the state of the world, and all the craziness called the entertainment business. How's it going today, brother?
It's going good. Sometimes we got a few things to deal with in the same day, kind of surprises. But I think we made it to the 11th hour and became 12th hour now, and we're good.
Okay, awesome. Glad to hear that. Well, to kick us off, you've got an amazing amount of mastering credits. Anybody who's watching, please Google the master there and see all the awesome records he's done. But I especially now with the collaboration back and forth with so many people trading tracks and during COVID putting their own releases out, whether it's just YouTube channels or YouTube releases or actually doing records. It's amazing to me that I still get people going, well, do I need this mastering thing? I've got a little app on my recording software or whatever. So once again, I realize this is a super dumb question and that you've probably been asked it a gazillion times, but just for the Kingdom of Rock community out there, it's like, what is so still critical to this day about the mastering process?
Well, first of all, I got that question probably a gazillion and 2 times already.
Okay, sorry about that.
All the time. The mastering process is part of the production. Okay, it's not the production itself. In the writing, arranging, and how you record. It's more of like the finishing touches, kind of the QC, QA, whatever you want to call that. And it's the last chance to make artistic and technical changes before it's released. It's kind of the buffer between the production and the audience, and that's a small stage that can make little differences and big differences, and there's something in between as well. But it's that place where you can adjust it to fit the different playback systems, the different formats. You can refine certain things that before were harder to do, or you can listen to it and find problems that were there, but you couldn't notice them in the environments you were working it with. Tailor it to a certain audience. Think of it as you go to a museum and you see a picture. That picture, if you take the frame out and take the lighting out and take where it's positioned at, it will look very different because it's on its own. But once you add a frame, like the color or the shape of the frame, if it's flat frame or coming out, the lighting on the picture, the positioning of the lighting, and how much it reflects certain colors or shades, and where the focal point is, that affects how you look at that picture. So surrounding the picture is helping you understand the presentation of the picture, and that's kind of mastering. It's like the presentation of that product. Does it need to be louder or less louder? Does it need to be warmer or brighter, or warm and sizzly, or warm and bright but not harsh? Does it need more low end or less low end? Or do you want it to feel more tight and punchy, or softer and pillowy? Does it need to be more aggressive or a bit loose? You can do a lot of things in the mastering stage, although you're limited to 2 tracks left and right, unless you're doing stem mastering where you have other parts of the mix, or surround mastering where you have left, right, and center and back. But you really have the ability to adjust how the music is presented out, and it could be more engaging to the listener that way if it's done right. And when I say right or wrong, it's more of like right in order to fit the artist's vision and the production vision. And not to go against it, unless there's a problem there and you really got to fix it.
Mhm.
But mastering is kind of a makeup thing. It's applied to it. And the listener listens to it as part of it. They don't know if it was the mastering that did it, or if it was the mixing or the production. They just see it as a whole, as part of the whole project. But it's really a section that could be, I don't know, 5% change to 35, 40% change, whatever. It could be a big change or really little or in between. And sometimes even if there's feedback from the mastering engineer how to fix certain problems by tweaking them in the mix, then that mastering actually helped the mix become better by giving suggestions how to improve the mix, and then getting a better mix to work with in the mastering stage. So it could be even an improvement on the mix by feedback for the mix.
Got it. Well, what are some of the we mentioned in the green room, so I'll bring this up. What are some of the dangers or compromises that, let's say, a home recording musician faces if he or she decides, well, I'll just use a EQ app on my DAW, or I saw a bunch of YouTube videos on mastering, so I think I can do this because it's just really EQ, right? So what are some of the dangers those musicians might face taking it into their own hands?
Well, it's not just EQ. You have compression, you have limiting. Some of the situations we use saturation, clipping, multi-band compression, which shapes the tone like if you use an EQ as well, but it's compressors. There's stereo widening effects. There's a ton of stuff that you can do, to color the sound and shape it. What are the dangers? Well, think of it this way. You can get decent results or okay results that you're happy with, but they're not always translating outside if you don't have the experience of hearing it, how it goes outside. Plus, you have to remember that you're in your room, which has its own acoustical uh, imprint.
Yeah.
Right.
So your speakers might not reflect the reality, or the room might not, or both speakers and room. And going outside to a better facility can showcase issues better. And also you can hone on problems and maybe tweak them, fix them. Sometimes you can't fix them because fixing them will create a different problem, but you can find the right compromise to make it work. Also, as a mastering engineer, we're objective. We haven't worked on the song before, so we don't know how the lyrics are, and we don't know how things sound. So that's our first time listening, and that way we judge it with objectivity, and we can bring a fresh new perspective to the sound, and we can adjust things to help fix a situation and enhance good stuff. And sometimes we just enhance, and make it sound better. There are times where we just fix if needed, but I see it as a combination: fixing and enhancing, or enhancing. Um, it's
there's a lot of online sites that tell you can just upload your file and it automatically masters it for you and all that stuff. What would you say to somebody that's like, oh man, I don't want to hire a mastering engineer for one track. That's going to cost me a bunch of money. And, I can just go onto the internet and upload my WAV file to the site, and it'll do it for me. And I'm just going to trust them, to do that for me. What do you have to say about like online mastering sites and stuff like that?
An algorithm has certain inputs that were given to it while it was created. It doesn't have feeling. It doesn't have aesthetics. It doesn't have communication. It doesn't have taste. And I'm not saying you can't get good results. I mean, it might fit the algorithm,
right?
And it might fit what you want. If If it makes it just a bit louder and boost a few things that you like, then it might work. But it's not getting what you really can get. It's like the difference when you buy ice cream. You can buy certain ice cream that's always the same, and it has a taste that's okay, and you like it. And then there's ice cream where there's different tastes, and you can choose. Oh, you like this type of vanilla, or you like the vanilla with the cookies, or you like the ones that make this one, or everything that can be sold as an instant can work, but it has its limitations. It's like with music, it's like you can do the same song, or you can put more feelings into it. Take the same notes, but play them differently. But it's the same notes. So what? If it's the same notes, it feels different. Like reading words as a singer, there's a delivery thing. Well, both singers might have the same vocal range and sing it, but one has a different delivery than the other. The articulation is different. Okay.
Well, how do you pick up?
By the way, just to finish this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're bad. Because some people say, hey, I don't have the money to put, and I need to release a ton of stuff in one time. I get it. If you don't want to put money on it, if you don't have the time and you need it quick, maybe that's a solution for that. But I don't think it's a great solution for everything, and I don't think it will give you the vibe that maybe will, fit the music always.
Well, one thing I've noticed, I kind of watch people as they talk, since we're on camera and everything, and you're an artist. Like you're not just like, when you think mastering engineers, you got all this gear, and this gear kind of eclipses the person in a way in my brain, because it's like, oh, I've got all this tube gear, and dude, you have a great studio, beautiful. Like, look at that. Yeah. I mean, that probably cost a little bit of money to get that kind of set up. It took some time.
Money, but time.
Yeah. And it's like, but the reality is, like, you're an artist, and you care about what you're doing. Obviously you want to serve the customer, but you're an artist. You're going to put in your own, vibe and your own way of doing things. It's going to make your mastering unique. How do you, like, I'm getting ready to release a track, and we've talked a little bit about perhaps having you master the track, but how do you find somebody that's suitable for your project, keeping in mind the fact that it's not just the gear, it's not just the time, it's the person as well?
Well, there's the old cliche, it's not the gear, it's the ear. And it's true, you're using your ears. But I'm honest about it. And part of the honesty about it is that, yeah, I do use the gear. If I didn't have the gear, then I would have to use whatever's possible and just go by my ear. But my ear also tells me to work with certain gear. It's the same as if you're a guitar player, you're running rhythm guitars, and you know that guitar has a certain sound. Although you sound good on it, you prefer the other guitar. Now, like, we can say the sound is in your hands. It's true. But the fact you're choosing the other guitar because the sound is different, that's not just the ear, it's the gear. So it's the combination of both. Okay, the ear is what dictates where you're going. The gear is a tool to use. And if you don't have the tool and you have something else, you'll do your best with what you have. If you have the tools to work with, then you have an arsenal of things to choose from that will suit the project better. So I do have a lot of gear that I think for my usage is good for me, because it lets me have the ability to go from one project to another without having to stay the same if it doesn't need to be the same. So I have the flexibility to choose what type of tonal options are for that project. Where there, I'll figure out what fits best, but I have a palette of them to play with. Then moving to the different project and be like, oh, this one needs a different sound, okay, and I have what I need to do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned playback systems, and it must be challenging or frustrating that there's so many playback systems that listeners use these days, from earbuds to crappy little computer speakers inside the laptop to bigger desktop, computer speakers to really nice stereo systems. It's how do you have to strike a balance between all that, or do you specifically ask the client where they think their main listening arena is going to be, or do you even worry about that at all and just make it the best you can for your ears?
Well, first of all, we start with doing the best we can for our ears. I'm saying R as mastering engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So, but first of all, it has to fit what I think. Then when I send it to the client, it has to fit with the client. Okay, so it's kind of like a checklist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy with it. Okay, now it goes to the client. The client is happy with it. Great. And then the next. So the way I look at it is, and I'm also going to answer what we diverted for a second from. I always ask my clients to listen to it on a few different systems, because everyone has a few systems they're listening to, either the phone, the headphones, the earbuds,
mm-hmm.
car stereo, the laptop. You mentioned there's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it has to work with everything. First of all, once I'm happy with it, I know it covered a certain ground. Then once it goes through the filter of the client, if it's a band with 4 members, 3 members, 5 members, 6 members, that's even more people.
Mm-hmm.
They're checking it on their systems as well. And if there's a problem, or not a problem, maybe an aesthetic they're looking for, we can fix that. We can address it to fit their vision of it, what they're looking for. If there's a problem, then they can mention where they heard it. And in some cases, we can fix it and it won't appear again. In some cases, it won't appear on a lot of systems, but on 1 or 2 it will.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to maximize the potential. I can't say it's going to work on every system, because there's always that system that it's not working on.
Right.
It's working on, but it's not as amazing as the others, and you got to live with that,
Yeah.
But you're optimizing it for most systems to work.
So do you actually listen to the new earpods and things like that when new technology comes out? Do you add that to your listening repertoire, your list of things to listen through?
I don't, and there's a reason I don't.
Oh, okay.
I have the setups that I have here, and they're kind of an anchor. Because what happens with technology, when iPhones came out, when we had iPhone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they changed. And they also changed sonically.
Mm-hmm.
So when there was a transition between, let's say, iPhone 5 and iPhone 6 or 6 and 7, if someone had both iPhones, it will sound different on both iPhones. And you can't just say, okay, I've got to fix it for 6. Oh, but now it doesn't work on 7.
Right.
There's a place where something is not going to work right. So that's where the clients listen to it on the systems they know. Okay, and if they say there's a problem, I ask them what system it doesn't sound right on, and what do they notice. And it could be a resonance, like a problematic frequency in that driver or enclosure. And there are times where we can fix a frequency or 2 or something, or do something overall that makes it work on that one and doesn't harm on the others as much.
Yeah.
Compromise, we're fixing, changing a bit, but still works. And there are times where the change is just working on that one, but not on others, and then it ruins it. So
Mm-hmm.
you can't win them all, and you try to do the best you can. And again, the clients have their feedback too, and we want to give them all. I want to also repeat the question you asked me: how do you choose the mastering guy?
Yeah.
Well, you choose a person based on recommendation, of course, or if you've done records that you like. Also, it's not bad to communicate with the person. Now, I don't judge people by their behavior, of how cool they are or how not, because a lot of times they could be cool but not professional, or they could be professional and cool but not fitting your taste. One thing doesn't mean the other.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who could be dicks. Sorry for the word, but could be really bad people, but they're super good at what they're doing. And it doesn't mean you don't want to work with them. Maybe they're not cool to work with, but the results speak for themselves. So I try to be a nice person, a cool person, friendly, communicative. Um, but I also like to work with the music on an emotional level and try to understand what's there musically. I don't need the story behind it.
Mm-hmm.
The story not always is translated by the music. Sometimes it's your story, but the translation is something else. But I need to hear it and work with it. And then if it fits if what I did fits what you like, great. If it doesn't, that's where the communications comes into place, and that's where I want the feedback from you. And sometimes I'll ask beforehand, like, do you need it loud or do you need it dynamic, or is this, you want it warm or you want it bright and aggressive, or what type of markets is it going? Is it going for uh, Europe or here or all around, or if you're looking for a specific niche market that this fits into, where they have a certain sound. Some styles of music can sound one way here in America, and they'll sound differently in Sweden
Mm-hmm.
or France or in England. Same type of music, but they'll be different because what they do there sounds different in the frequencies they like hearing. Sometimes here it's a bit more low end, where in Europe it's a bit more punchy and aggressive on the top.
How do you, as a mastering engineer, how do you keep track of and choose these trends in like audio engineering? Like how do you like, because you hear like a lot of things coming out, that sound a certain way, like maybe heavy on the bass kick or something, something that's kind of in popular music on every track. But how do you like figure out what to put into your thinking when you approach mastering a track like that?
Well, first of all, you listen to the mix and see what's possible. Like if a mix has too much of something in a way that it's really hard to hear other stuff with, or if you think something is stopping it from popping out, then first work with what the mix gives you. And the mix will give you some clues because the aesthetic is probably there in a certain way, or the balances. Some mixes come in balanced really well but don't have the vibe. Some mixes come with vibe but not balanced well. Some have good vibe and good balance. Some have no vibe and no balance.
Mm-hmm.
What comes in will dictate to you what's there and where to go. And then there's, again, like I said, aesthetics and styles and subgenres where you can feel if it's heading that direction. And sometimes it comes from one direction, but they're heading to a different one. And that's where the communications is. They might say, we play southern rock, but we really want to sound more country, like current country, but they're playing southern rock. But they want a bit different high end, and they want it to be less heavy. Or someone will play, will do punk rock, but their music is actually hardcore. It's heavier.
Mm-hmm.
Now you need to make it lighter. Or they're playing heavy metal, but they want to sound more death.
But do you
don't have death metal vocals.
Yeah, well, I mean, on that note, if let's just talk about home studio people now, since that's going on during COVID, that may not have a awesome playback system, and they send their track to you, and like the kick drum bass is just killing it. Like they wanted heavy low end, but their system was deleting some of that. So by the time it gets to you, it's like, oh my God, the world is going to end here. Do you go back to them and say, listen, I really can't fix this. You're going to have to lower some things down before you give it to me, or do you take a crack at it?
Usually, if I hear a problem that has that is very visible, not eye-wise, but something I can quantify and tell my client,
Mm-hmm.
and it's better to fix it in the mix than try to fight it,
Mm-hmm.
because the fighting will compromise. Like if there's too much low end from the bass guitar, then I need to cut the low end.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm cutting low end from the song. In that case, I would prefer to call the mixer, say, maybe you can cut some low end from the bass guitar,
Mm-hmm.
or lower it just to, maybe it's too much, and that way, instead of me cutting low end and thinning the song, you can just clean up that low end, and that way I don't have to cut the low end from the song.
Right.
Same with kick and snare.
Mhm.
You know, if the kick is too loud, or the snare is too loud, or you know, or vocals are too harsh and abrasive, jumping out, or cymbals are too harsh, or even a combination, too
Mhm.
much high end in the cymbals and too much low end, or low end that's masking high end. There's so many things that can happen. In those cases, I usually actually call the mixer or whoever is involved to have them fix that, so we can get a better mix to start from and then master it better. In a case where they say that they can't make changes because they can't access the studio, or those mixes were done 4 years ago and they lost those hard drives or sessions, or they don't have anything anymore, or the computer's gone, whatever, that's what they have, and it's a as is, or the client is refusing to make changes, whatever. I mean, you can name a million reasons or excuses,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll work with it as is. But my initial thing is listen to it, try to see what you can do. If it's problems that really are major, or need that adjustment in order to get it sounding much better, then I'll get in touch with them.
Well, and here's another question you've probably been asked a gazillion and two times. So here's a gazillion and three, the gazillion and third time. But typically, let's say with home recording or more up and coming bands that are kind of taking their own recording sessions, they're producing their own record, so to speak. Is there a certain sonic thing that tends to come to you that's always a challenge or a problem? Or is it all over the map with how you get these things? Because I'm thinking that if we can kind of train home recording people or independent musicians to like not cause the mastering engineer problems, it's probably a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's start with this. It's not causing the mastering engineer problems. It's causing problems in the song to sound good.
Good point.
You're not causing me. It's your song. You want to release it like that. You know, it's a problem. Either you're part of the problem, part of the solution. You know, it's all over the map. I get a mixed bag of stuff. You know, I get all over the. You know, the quality can be from crappy to great. There are filters. You know, some people will probably get crappier stuff in, or some people will get better stuff in. You know, it's really all over, and you can't predict everything. But a lot of times the problems are the imbalances frequency wise. Either let's say vocals are too dull and then cymbals are too harsh, and it's very hard to fix that because you try to dull the cymbals and you're dulling the vocals. Or you get vocals that are too bright and then cymbals that are dull. Try to lower the harshness on the vocals and the cymbals are even more duller. You know, or you get too much bass and too much high end, and then you clean up the bass and then you got even more high end. Or you're not hearing that the high end is harsh because you have too much bass, and then you clean the bass, and then high end jumps up, and the client is like, "Oh, but you said to clean up the low end." Yeah, but now we hear how the low end is masking the high end. So you're gonna get a bunch of things all over the place.
And each project, I'm sure, is like its own version of Tetris, where you're trying to fit everything in there the way that it works. You know.
Yeah, it's a game of, you know, it's a push and pull. You know, you fix this thing, but now this reveals this. Okay, let's pull it back. Let's push this. Oh, now this does this. Okay, so maybe let's half push this. You know, I mean, let's say this: a mixing engineer has more things to deal with.
Yeah.
How has COVID affected your business? Has you know, I know a lot of artists have been home working on projects. Has that did you get a big drop in customers, or has it been pretty steady through the COVID?
Well, COVID affects in a lot of ways. In one way, some people were supposed to go on tour, make their money, and go record a record, and so, you know, now they didn't have the tour, so now they don't have the money. So either they go find a job or they decide to be creative and work on the record before. Some of them is the opposite. They wanted to do the record, they didn't have the time to do the record. Now they're doing the record. some of them were doing the record, and then due to COVID, they couldn't finish it, or to mix it, or some of the studios were closed, so they could print it, whatever. Let's say this: people might be very busy now. It does affect, when it hit first. A lot of people got hit from the cars.
Mm-hmm.
You could see it happening. Um, I kept busy. I am keeping busy because there's a lot of projects that were starting prior to COVID being,
Yeah.
exploding big time.
Hey, Maor, can you get a little closer to the microphone? I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
So there are, it did affect some of the artists I know, and some of the artists I work with. Things had to delay and all that, but I kept busy, and I'm keeping busy. There's projects that started way before this happened, so slowly they've gone back, and some of the studios opened so they can do overdubs and mix. And some projects started due to the COVID situation.
Mm-hmm.
The artists decided they're going to utilize this time for their music.
Have you had some cool projects come in during the COVID?
Yeah.
Any you can talk about yet?
Some of them came out now. But just a second, my dog is insisting to come to the podcast.
Bring him in. Yeah. What's the dog's name?
I'm gonna bring my dog in. Come.
Okay.
Mike, you need to release the hounds too. You might as well.
Well, my dogs are at daycare today, so they will not be joining the podcast, which I'm sure is
Pato, say hi.
Hey. Yeah, Matt was just saying while you were getting that my dogs tend to come in and bark through at least one section of the podcast every time, but
his dogs interrupted Steve Vai. Can you believe that?
Oh, I was supposed to be on that podcast.
Oh, you were. I remember that. Yeah, you had to change. But yeah, it was pretty funny actually. Steve made a joke about it. But
so you did the whole podcast?
No, there was only one or two instances where they decided to join the group, but and Steve was good natured about it, of course. Yeah. But what are you going to do? Dogs, mine aren't that quiet, sadly.
Right.
But well, I guess another question that I'd like to ask is if again, home studio musician, you're managing your own mix, and they know that they want to use you or someone else to master it. What advice would you give them to? I mean, I know there's the somewhat obvious stuff. Don't overcompress too much. Don't throw tons of reverb on things. But if you had your perfect mix that someone in like my position working at home would give you, what would that be? And how would you get me to the point where I give you something that's easier to work with than not?
Well, first of all, I would suggest communicate. Call the mastering guy, talk with him. Like, I tend to ask, what is it? Like, what do you want to achieve? Sometimes I'll ask them to just send me before we're working, maybe just so I can hear something. Or I'll ask, what are you using? Just so I'll know, not to say yes or no, but just to be prepared. Or I might say, can you do this and that? Or can you print just an extra print like this, just in case we need? It's really about communicating, especially the least the better it is to communicate, because you can save a lot of time. Sometimes a client tells me, we weren't sure about that keyboard volume. And I'm like, well, if you're not sure, print another version with it either up or down and send me, so I have it with me while I'm working, instead of calling you later, raise it up or take it down. That way I can listen to it and see if the problem exists. I can immediately swap between them and not have to call you, and later on we'll make it. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Just be prepared.
So that it's funny that's still, because I know in the mixing to vinyl days, we would used to send 3 mixes, like the mix where the vocal level was where we thought it should be, the vocal level a little higher, and the vocal level a little lower.
Right. it still can happen.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not asking for a ton of those, but if someone is skeptic about something, I'll ask them to, like, if there's a bass line that's kind of aggressive, they're not sure of, send me another one with that. Or if there's a vocal line that they're not sure if it's too loud or too low, just send me the opposite as well.
Okay.
So, yeah. Matt, you asked about records that I've done during COVID.
Yeah.
So I did a Yes Live album,
Whoa.
the Royal Affair tour live from Las Vegas. It just came out this month.
Mhm.
Oh, no, okay, actually, it came out in October 30th. So,
I'm gonna go. Is it on streaming yet?
it's out now. I think. It's,
Oh yeah. I'm gonna go listen to that after the broadcast. Actually, that sounds cool.
So yeah, Yes, the Royal Affair tour live from Las Vegas. There was another record I did during during COVID. It came out was Green Carnation, Leaves of Yesteryear. A really good record. We just did now also a single, like a almost 10-minute song, it's like a 9-something minute song. It's coming out 2 days. It's called The World Without a View. Um, uh, I did a lot of records.
No, it's cool. I think just the Yes thing made COVID worth it. That's cool.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were some of those records that I've done were pre-COVID, and then it came out during COVID,
Yeah.
and some of them were done during COVID.
Yeah.
So,
Well, let me ask you some gear questions. So I see you've got the kind of spaceship looking stuff on the wall there, and you've got all these knobs and speakers and stuff in there. I mean, just give us a brief rundown of your setup. You don't have to get into all the details, but just kind of like what's your
okay.
Your,
So,
your,
like, how
your,
does-
go,
how does-
your
how does it
go-to
work?
stuff.
okay,
Yeah.
so first of all, the monitors.
Mhm.
You see, there's two big black monitors. Those are PMC IB1s. They're three-way monitors.
Yeah.
And they're connected to an amplifier, which sits in the middle. That silver one under those view meters.
Yeah.
And then here there's a mastering console, the one with the green and red switches. That's to insert compressors and limiters and EQs, so you could put them in the chain. Think of it like in plugins, how you put them in the channel. You put 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can route the equipment. And then a lot of this is custom made, custom modified gear. Some of it has my name on it. Some of them are compressors. Some of them are like this, the oven.
Mm-hmm.
That's a collaboration with Handy Amps and me. It's a coloration, saturation, Mojo vibe box with an EQ. A lot of these devices here, like the Magic Death Eye compressor, that's the silver one with the big knobs. There's an oven there again. There's an Electronaut, that's a compressor. There's the bench, which is a custom of mine. That's like a saturation. And we have another here, coloration, saturation. Everything was shin, and compressor and limiter, and so it's different. And then I also have some other stuff here. It's called like the floating rig of other devices that I can use for compression and limiting.
Is that Rupert Neve? Is that what that is?
Oh, that's a Rupert Neve Designs MBP, Master Bus Processor.
Yeah, that's the one. I was gonna borrow one of those from them just to play with it one time, and I didn't do it. But do you
It's
like
a good device. Yeah, I did a Faith No More record with it as part of the chain, but I did that record called Soul Invictus. It's this.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, let's see some of your plaques. What do you got? Faith No More. That's cool.
With Reich, Eric Gales.
Oh, you did the new Eric Gales album. Matt Wallace was on here talking about that.
Yeah, it's the latest one. Yeah, it's called The Bookends. I actually did 3 records with him. I did The Bookends. That's the one with Matt Wallace. I did the one before called Middle of the Road with Fabrizio Grossi. And I did the one before called Good for Something. And Sol Invictus, it's also with Matt. Then there's one here, Starset. This one, Ben Gross mixed. And there's more plaques that I didn't get, but there's like some of the records I've done, Meatloaf, and Yes, I've done like 6 records with Yes, and Faith No More. I remastered the first album, We Care a Lot, with bonus tracks.
I have an offline story to tell you about about that album but I don't want to say it online.
Oh, that We Care a Lot.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one is basically Billy, the bass player from Faith No More. He found the original tapes of the mixes and the 2-inch and
Oh, that's super cool.
And all that. So they digitized it, and I had the original versions of the mixes, and I remastered it. And Matt Wallace remixed a few songs from the 2-inch, and there was a 1/4-inch or 1/2-inch, I don't remember. So it featured the bonus tracks.
Yeah. Now I just have a friend that has they needed to get some samples off of one of their albums for a tour, and so they gave him the master session to pull the tracks off so they could sample the actual weird noises and stuff off of the album. But when I brought my girlfriend at the time to LA and we to a studio, and I'll tell you who it was later, but they were just letting us play with the mix and stuff. It was for one of those tracks on that album. It was pretty cool.
We Care a Lot.
Yeah. That's wait, what's the one that had Epic on it?
No, that's 2 albums later. That's
where they blew up the piano.
Yeah. That's called
that album. I can't remember what it was called.
The Real Thing. The Real Thing.
Yeah. Well,
hey, as someone who's obviously touched like tons of music out there, do you feel during your career that musicians are getting more savvy about sonics and are giving you things that you kind of go, hey, this is pretty awesome, or it's about the same as it ever was, or is there just this huge gulf between stuff that's like, oh my God, I don't even know if I can work with that, to being pretty awesome?
I think today we actually got better, but the same. Like what happened is, technology gives a lot of power to people, and they have plugins that do amazing stuff. They got samples. They got a really good arsenal of stuff to work with. And you get to a point where you get like 20 mixes that sound very similar because they use either the same presets, same samples. Now they do sound good, but now it became my job to make them sound different from each other. I have to give the identity for each one, so they're not as the same. So that's why it's good to have the arsenal of different types of gear and aesthetics and knowing where to take each project. But definitely today you get stuff that sounds much more in the ballpark of what the surrounding material is.
Yeah.
It's good, but the bad part of it is the identity gets lost. Back in the day, you could recognize a band by how they sound. Now, you might recognize the mixer.
Well, it's weird.
The same producer, and that producer sounds in a certain way. You might say, "Oh, that's a production of his. I can recognize the sound." Where in the older days, you can recognize certain producers, but because they might be like icons in certain things, but some productions, they were the same producer but different bands, and you could hear each band had their own. So there is this balance where some producers today will still give you each band sounding very independent of their own thing. They have their own identity, and although you could hear the production, you could still feel this is that band. With some type of productions, you could notice
Yeah.
production.
I remember Dave Davies once told me that the things that destroyed rock and roll were the chromatic tuner and the click track, because he said back in the day when we were working, we tuned to a piano which was maybe out of tune. So the Kinks tuned differently than the Stones, who tuned differently than the Beatles. They heard tones differently, so the records are different sounds. And the same with click tracks, where you loved your drummer because that drummer heard time in their own way, and all of a sudden when it became conventional, that kind of went bye-bye. So it's interesting that you brought that aspect up again, because I think identity is important, certainly, to bands and music, and it's sad if someone chooses to go the conventional route.
Right. Well, a producer is somebody who listens to the music and reflects it. So it's fine to hear the production and the producer in the music. I think it's actually good because it's another spice in it. The only question is when that identity of the combination is recognizable from that record, or maybe a few records, but when they have other artists, then it starts to sound the same. And if it's a winning formula, okay, that's what it is, and that's why it works. But if it's not a winning formula, if it's just a standard way that this is how it sounds, then that's a place where certain bands might lose from it. Some might benefit from it because it's like, oh, it's like this band, and we like how that sounds. But some bands might lose identity due to that. So you pick and choose, and in some cases, that's why it's good to have a different mixer. Like even sometimes you prefer having a different mixer than the producer just to bring new spice into the table. Same with mastering. You want to have a different spice. So I like when there's different people involved. I think that some of the best records ever made were made with the different people involved. And even assistant engineers are part of the equation.
Yeah.
Something to the table. They bring stuff on time. They patch things. Sometimes a mistake was done, and that was part of it. Or the equipment. Just like you said with the piano, like even if it's the same mixing board, every studio is different, even with the same mixing board, due to how the electricity is there, how stable it is, how clean it is, how was the board serviced. If it's the same parts, or some channels got wacky, and that's part of the sound. It's not crazy. Like there are sometimes pieces of gear that kind of started malfunctioning, but we like the results of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, this used to sound better, but now it has this thing that's weird, but we dig it. It's actually kind of aggressive, more, in a way, or it compresses in a way, and that's the funkiness of it is sometimes the identity.
Imperfect perfection. So it's like it's perfect because it's imperfect. It's like it has its own color to it. Like it. You're talking about spices. I know, like, there's certain things you don't ever want to add cinnamon to because it's probably not going to be good, right? So, like, is there anything in your mastering arsenal that you've got to be super careful with? Like, you don't want to put too much of that spice in there, or it's going to ruin everything.
I think that applies to everything because certain things up front it's not going to fit, but sometimes you have to experiment. There's no rules. I mean, but if something is very bright, you probably don't want to make it bright.
It's true that
too much low end, you probably are not going to head on pushing the low end much more. I mean, unless you're going for an aesthetic that is kind of weird. It's like, okay, it's really low endish, but you know what? Maybe we'll add more low end and scoop something else, and it will actually sound intentional. the whole idea is, if you think of it, when you're tracking, you're recording, the whole capturing is basically trying to take a performance and delivering it to the listener. The listener needs to feel it's intentional. Okay? So whatever happens in that performance, even if you fix it or not, the listener takes it as intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And you said the imperfection is the perfection. Well, the imperfection is not the perfection. The imperfection is a circumstance and a situation, and we can decide to take that as the right way because we
Right.
like it, and then we apply perfection to it. It's like, oh, it's
Gotcha.
perfect. We like it like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Gotcha.
it's not from the get-go the perfect. It's our ability to accept it.
Right.
And sometimes a record comes in, and you're like, oh my God, this sounds bad. And then you're like, you know what? Let's make that bad sound intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Right.
you start playing around with some gear and making it sound like that bad is not bad. It's we wanted you to feel that way, and not because it happened.
Mm-hmm.
But that circumstances led to it. Now it's not a circumstance for the listener. It's like, this is what we wanted you to get from the get-go.
Rock guitarists do that all the time. They're like, I didn't mean to play that note. Oh wait, yes I did, and I bent it just so that it sounds just right. It's like a lot of rock guitarists are just really good at capitalizing on mistakes. Can I say that, Mike?
You can say it's a free country. Last time I checked.
You can say that on everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting point because when you're talking about making things intentional, because you're right. I think that's one of the major benefits of having someone like you, who's a musical person, an artist in their own right, listen to something and go, well, this probably happened because the mic was messed up or they just didn't know how to record an acoustic guitar. But putting that intentional aspect to something that was unintentional, that's a pretty deep thought, to anybody making records today, and I think that's something you obviously bring to the table that's extremely valuable.
Well, there's a lot of mistakes that happen in a lot of records, which became legendary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those mistakes, they keep us talking about it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, that thing with the reverb, and you can hear the slap back, and it's like, it was a mistake with this, with the tape and all that. Yeah, those mistakes, they were kept because either there was no way to fix them, or there was no way to fix them, but they actually turned out to be good mistakes. I've heard a ton of stories, I've heard a ton of mistakes on mastering as well. Some of them, are like, what? Really? And you're like, oh my God, like, you're like, it's crazy how these things happen. And they do, okay? And sometimes the artist was like, yeah, I like that. No, we should do it better. We should fix that. No, but I do want that. I want that. It's like, now go argue with him, So once it's out, it's out. And hopefully they think it's intentional. And sometimes we make it intentional by, dealing with it and improving it to a point where it doesn't sound like it was a mistake.
Yeah.
Well, I also think that it's for anyone out there listening who is working at home on their own. If you can pick a mastering engineer early, like you mentioned, having a conversation with the mastering engineer before they mix it, so you can be mastering engineer, sorry. So you can be forewarned about certain things. I think that's valuable. It's kind of the planning ahead aspect that a lot of musicians kind of aren't really typically that good at. But if you really want your track to shine, kind of visualizing it from recording, mixing to your room is probably a good tactic to take. So that advice is pretty awesome.
And you know what? There's records. And I'm saying this because I think people need to know. There's records that during the process of the mastering, because there were a lot of fixes in the mixes done, I would give feedback to the client and say, look, you need to fix that and all that.
I can't hear you.
Because they were open, to making changes in the mixes based on suggestions, the feedback we give them after hearing stuff. It changed the whole record. Besides the mastering itself, but it changed the whole record from something being like, okay, good demo, to actually like really sounding impressive in terms of not the production bigness or something like that or frequencies, but more of like, I get the music now, I can understand the story better, I can relate to it. And then of course with the mastering on top of that, even make them get into it, engage them with that listening experience where they connect on another level with that record. And it is possible to do that, with good mastering. Just like a good mix will showcase the song nicely. When you add all these spices up, not too much, not too little, but when they get the right quantity of each and they fit together, that record sits with you on more levels. Even if the song is less good, I'm not saying you can compete with a good song, but I'm saying if the song is less good, the presentation of it is better, there's more chances for people to connect to it. If they connect deeper and deeper, that's of course also the song.
Yeah.
There's records where they have cool songs that are not as deep, but it sounds good enough that it goes above the listenable. It's more like, oh, I'm actually enjoying this more. Although it's not as good as some of it's there, but it becomes part of that feeling that is represented throughout the record.
Yeah, awesome. Good point. Good point.
Well, we are getting close to the top of the hour here, so I wanted to give everybody a chance for closing remarks. Mike, what you got?
Well, I just want to thank you for being here. You did explain some things that were fabulous. Hopefully everybody out there in the Kingdom of Rock will understand mastering and the artistry that mastering engineers bring to the table. And hopefully you won't start screwing up your home recordings, and make sure that they sound good before they get to your mastering engineer. So all the advice you handed out, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. And I think it's great you guys are doing this because, there's a lot of stuff out there, and it's like records. The market is full and saturated, and it's important to get the right information out there, and hopefully people will get to it. Because if it's not out and they get a lot of misinformation or half information, they get the wrong things. And you guys are doing a great job by bringing people, of a high caliber, and letting them, drop some information here to people. And you guys have great questions. And, I'm honored to be on the podcast.
Well, we appreciate that. I mean, we do want musicians out there to turn better work in, and we're kind of hard asses about don't give up, don't let your ego absorb your art, don't think okay is good enough. And you've brought a lot of those issues to the fore today as well. It's just we just don't want anybody to we want the landscape to be possible for success, because you're right, there's a ton of records out there. How do you break through the distortion? How do you break through all the it's like it's a forest of weeds and stuff that an artist has to break through today. It's not easy. But if there's a sonic problem that's preventing an audience from reaching an artist, and that's something you could have solved, well, that's on us as artists.
I just learned that you should just make mistakes and give them to your mastering engineer and tell him it's art and let him figure it out. That's what I'm going to do from now on.
Or make the mistake bigger.
It's all for the art. And if you say this is what I wanted, then everybody will accept it as what you wanted. I'm not sure they're going to accept it as what they want.
That's a good point to end on right there.
Thank you, Maor Appelbaum, for being on the show. Where can people find out more about you?
You can go to my website, www.maorappelbaum.com, maorappelbaum.com, or just Google Maor Appelbaum, or Facebook. I have like 6 of them, so Maor Appelbaum, or Maor Appelbaum Mastering, or Radiant Mastering. Just feel free to get in touch if you want to ask some questions. Again, maorappelbaum.com.
Yep. And I just put the link in the comments on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. So it's out
the
there.
Comments are down there.
The comments. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. This is another episode of Kingdom of Rock out. And we'll see you every Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. See ya.